Today's Inside Look, and joining me for more on that now is Martin Zaborowski, Director of the Polish Institute of International Affairs, joining us now via Skype from Warsaw. Thank you for joining us, sir. All this diplomatic wrangling today on Ukraine comes just a day after the U.S. President Barack Obama warned Moscow was, quote, not fooling anybody over its role in Crimea. Russia, of course, still denying its forces are even operating in the region. There has been some real tough words exchanged between Russia and the U.S. Will the diplomats today be able to overcome that animosity and come to some sort of solution, do you think?
Well, I think it will be extremely difficult because what we essentially have at the moment is the situation when Russia had invaded the territory of another country in breach of United Nations Charter, in breach of the rules of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and in breach of bilateral treaties between Ukraine and Russia. So this is a situation that cannot be tolerated by international community without raising its objections. At the same time, Russia is portraying that is actually saying that it's not Russian troops, but it's the self-defense force, which is present in Crimea, which we don't really believe in. And number two, it's saying that this is a protection of the Russian minority there. And that's the way, actually in Crimea is majority, you might say. And that's the way it's being portrayed in the Russian media. So the narrative of the Russian media is very clearly that, we are just defending Russians abroad.
Martin, what about sanctions? France has said that sanctions on Russia could be a very real possibility, perhaps as early as this week. Do you think that that could indeed happen? And would sanctions on Russia do anything?
I think that sanctions should be a serious possibility. But when we have to do with a situation when, you have really a very blatant breach of international law and international rules in EU direct neighborhood, if that goes without reaction, Russia will be encouraged to go further. Today is Crimea, tomorrow it will be Eastern Ukraine, then it might be Moldova, Georgia, and then who knows, it might be Narva, Russian-speaking region in Estonia, for example. So it's very important that at this point in time, we do very clearly show Russia that this kind of behavior is not going without consequences.
You've said in the past that now it's time for radically more engaged steps from the European Union. We've just heard from the European Commission President that it's going to give an 11 billion euro aid package. Is that enough, or are you talking about even more concrete steps than just giving money?
Well, I think what we really need for Ukraine is a sort of a Marshall Plan that the United States has offered to Western Europeans in the 1940s, late 1940s. And, France, Italy, Turkey, the others, have benefited from that hugely. And then it solidified their presence in the Western Bloc. What we have now is the situation where the majority of Ukrainians want integration with the European Union, when they want relationship with the West. And this is denied to them by Russia, which has many, many levers in Ukraine of very, very different nature. And I think giving financial aid to Ukraine is one of the steps, but we also have to be very careful who do we give this financial aid to, but it does not end in the hands of oligarchs or, corrupted administration. I think we need a concerted, strategic action here when we think about, preferential trade barriers, but we think about, how to help in developing, civil society, how to fight corruption. Giving one amount of money to Ukraine is not enough. We need basically a longer-term strategy here.
What about the fact you said that many Ukrainians are hungry for the European Union, but interestingly enough, something like some 80% of Ukrainians have never even traveled to the EU. Why is that, and where does this hunger for the EU come from?
Well, the Ukrainians are looking into the EU as the model that they aspire to have at some point in time. Let's remind ourselves that 20 years ago, Ukraine and Poland, where I'm sitting at the moment, were on the same level of economic development. The GDP per capita in Ukraine and in Poland was pretty much the same. Now, 20 years later, Poland went through a transition from communist to a free market economy to a liberal democracy. And at the moment, Polish GDP per capita is 3 times higher than it is the case in Ukraine. And some Ukrainians know about it. Those Ukrainians who have traveled to Poland, who have traveled to other places in the EU, others know it from television or from stories from their friends, so to speak. But many of Ukrainians have not traveled to the EU because of the visa situation. Simply, it's unaffordable for many Ukrainians to buy EU visa, Schengen visa. Some of them don't even know very well that such a possibility exists. So it's important that we enhance people-to-people contact and that we let Ukrainians to get the EU better, to get to know the EU better.
All right, thank you so much for that, Martin Zaborowski. We'll have to leave it there. And thanks to all of you for watching France 24. Do stay tuned. We'll be back right after the break.
Thank you.
Beyond Business.
Are you a patriotic shopper? The French government wants consumers to opt for domestically made products to support French jobs. In Beyond Business, we look at the Made in France label and whether or not it actually pays off.
Beyond Business, en France 24, en France24.com.